Hi guys, welcome to the Alpha Strike podcast. My name is Daniel, and I have Red Powell and Robert Chandler on. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit Marines. We're going to talk. Robert has Warzone Come the Apocalypse coming up. We're going to touch a little on that. We're going to talk about some upcoming events and see what get your thoughts on it, and we'll do another video probably later on this week as well and field those questions. So feel free to email us or even drop anything on Facebook or even on this episode through YouTube, Facebook. They'll be both posted there as well. So welcome to the Alpha Strike. We're going to start off a little bit by discussing Marines. And first off, Robert, introduce yourself and tell everyone what you play, what you're working on.
Yeah, so I'm Robert Chandler. I've been playing 40K for a long, long time. I'm from the Dothan, Alabama area. I run the Come the Apocalypse Grand Tournament down here, which will be October 19th and 20th. I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit. I have a bunch of armies. I have Eldar, I have Blood Angels, I have Knights, Custodes, Chaos, some Guard. I've got quite a lot of some and a little bit of some, so of a lot of different things. So,
and you have mainly been like a Blood Angel / Eldar player for the most part, with a little bit of Chaos in there. So, you've got the new Marines coming out, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm currently working on a Iron Hands army. So that's my goal is actually to bring to CTA is the Iron Hands.
nice.
So Red's still working on your corn, correct?
Yeah, so I'm my corn is it will be the proto corn will be present at CTA, and then it should be full blown exterminatus required corn for Warzone Atlanta.
No boy.
Just wait.
Right.
Just wait.
So you're taking the extra attack way, eh?
I mean, I'm gonna run with whatever GW can give me. I mean, because apparently, hateful assault is all I need to be able to counter all the Space Marine stuff that's being put on the table.
Sounds good. It you'll reach out and touch a lot of, I believe. So it'll be interesting.
It will be interesting.
Hands Codex has dropped. It didn't make the cutoff for the tournament that I went to this week, so I played Knights. Ended up winning that. I think Knights are really strong versus the new Marine supposed meta. They're gonna have to really think about their list before they go out and play against Knights. Of course, volume of shots can still wreck a Knight, but can they wreck 3? And that's the litmus, right, Red?
I mean, apparently that's all some people are worried about is 3 Knights.
Is that the we'll call it the bird effect.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. So, but yeah, I think I think Knights have a play here. In the new meta, they're definitely going to see a resurgence of those. A little bit of drop from the custode that we were seeing. Haven't seen a whole lot in mini list, although we only really had London GT, and they don't allow Forge World, so that was kind of a sad times to see if anything changed in the meta. It's going to be interesting because I think they're still good, the custodes, but I think there's a lot of variations that took a hit from as far as this. So we got the new Iron Hand stuff. We haven't got the FAQ yet, so that's Obviously that should hit what Sunday, this next Sunday, or 2 weeks
Supposed.
out. Yeah. So, well, just for the Iron Hand and Raven Guard, right? Because every time they release a codex, they have to have an FAQ about a week or two out. So, all right, we're on the verge of the end of September here with the FAQ that was supposed to drop. Haven't been a whole lot of Chicken Littles because they've been staying on top of things. I believe, as far as the company wide, with their FAQs and their involvement in the game. So that's a great thing to see. Uh, GW coming full circle. So, is there anything in particular either of you think that possibly will get slapped on the PP with a slight FAQ of the two codexes? We're not talking full game wide. We're talking uh, these two codexes that just popped out.
I think the recent Goonhammer article did a good job highlighting some of the stuff with Iron Hands and vehicles, and I think if you got a chance to see that, they brought up a point with timing that I don't know if it's necessarily as big of an issue as they highlighted, but it is still something that might need some clarification. And just a matter of, so so I mean, it's just a mathematical process, right? So like you divide and then you reduce damage or what have you, which essentially makes some things like the Leviathan Dreadnought, like I mean, it makes some of this Iron Hands equipment, these dreadnoughts, it makes them really tough. It makes them extremely tough. And so, does that necessarily need balancing? No, I don't think it necessarily needs balancing, because I think that the current, whether you want to call it trend or slippery slope or whatever you want to call the codex evolution at this point, I think things are becoming more and more aggressive. And I think that aggressiveness continues to, as that continues to escalate, I think that the survivability of Iron Hands will be nothing remarkable in the grand scheme of everything else when it all gets there, right?
Right. So, it's very interesting the way you said that. And I have to agree because I've said this for a little while that if GW doesn't like the clock aspect, and even talking to the game designers while I was at Nova, they don't like the clock. They're very against the clock, actually. So, what do you do to improve the game where you don't need a clock? You speed it up. And the way you speed it up is you bring back the drop pod assault. You bring back a vehicle which hasn't been released yet, the Impulsor, which can basically do the same thing, right? You're pushing it up the board and you're jumping out. You're bringing back designs in the game that makes it faster. Not necessarily, the glass hammer type, but it's faster in a lot of different ways. To maneuver and to get your units out and on the table and actually play instead of holding them in reserve or anything like that. And we've seen, just as of Nova, the whole Gene Stiller cult ruling, right, where they can't come in past turn 3, which is a design. I mean, and that was a design flaw that people were, using and abusing. Uh, it really slowed down the game, but by bringing them in, now you're speeding up the game as well. So I have to agree 100%. I think that's the way that GW, also is looking at it as well. So we're planning on seeing more of that, I would say. But yeah, I think there's a couple of things. Robert, you got anything in particular that you can think of that might get PB slapped in the FAQ?
Not directly in the FAQ per se. I think they probably will do like what Red said. They will clarify how the Ironstone works in relation to the half damage strat when used on like Leviathan Dreads and other dreadnoughts. I think that's probably something that they will end up clarifying. Outside of that, I don't really see anything that they need to FAQ right at the moment. I think down the road, there's probably going to be some kind of tweak, maybe, or adjustment to how, for example, Iron Hands functions with Leviathan Dreads, or my biggest fear, because of course I love the model not just because of how good it is on the table, but because it's an awesome looking model for Marines. Forge World has kind of had a history of overcorrecting. They did not do that with Custodes, which was a good thing with the Caladius tanks. But what I would hate to see would be, for example, the Leviathan Dread to go up to a certain point level where it's just not practical to bring. But aside from that, I don't really know what they could do at this point because the key interaction with Iron Hands and Leviathan Dreads is Leviathans on their own are not overpowered by any stretch, but when you factor them in with how Iron Hands functions, they become really a problematic unit on the table. But maybe they intend it to be that way, and then we'll leave it as such. But as far as any FAQs go or anything like that, other than what Red touched on, I really don't think I'm not up to speed on Raven Guard really that much. I mean, obviously, I think most of the competitive focus has been on Iron Hands, and but there may be some things in Raven Guard that need to be addressed that I'm just not sure of. But as far as Iron Hands, I don't really see anything beyond that they'll need to kind of clarify.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything outside that just jumps out and screams at you on the Raven Guard Codex. The Iron Hands, I know there's a lot of complaints about the stone, basically. I mean,
yeah,
there's it's still a 3-inch bubble. So
yeah, and that's the thing to factor in. I mean, we're in a meta right now where characters can be picked off by many armies pretty easily, and the character that's carrying that Ironstone is going to be targetable by a lot of different armies. So, be it with units like Eliminators or Assassins or what have you, that the character that's going to be carrying that's probably a Tech Marine or something like that, maybe a Chapter Master Captain. Those kind of units that can be taken down, and I think that's going to be kind of the key, really, and people are going to start seeing that, in target priority. People are going to hone in on eliminating the characters before they ever dump shot number 1 into the Leviathan or whatever it's buffing. And there's so many tools with these armies to do that.
right.
Unless you can just really hide the character well, which if you do so, it is, like you said, a 3-inch bubble. It's not like you can hide a character behind a wall and still maintain 6 inches of that dread. He needs to be moving around the table because his range is only 24, which means the character is going to need to stay with him, and that becomes much more difficult to hide. So
I think there's 2 things that shuts down Iron Hands at the moment. I think board control, playing the mission wise with board control, definitely shuts them down. If you can outlast them, you can just score playing the mission wise, and then assaulting armies. One, you're creating board control with the assault, and 2, just touching a lot of the stuff that people are going to run. They're not ultras, so they can't back out and shoot. Outside of the executioner tank, there's not a whole lot of options that just kind of fly away.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the people are kind of honing in on the Leviathan, and certainly is a powerful option, but I think ultimately what's going to be probably the more dangerous long-term threat for the Iron Hands opponent is the repulsors, those executioners. Having that 5-up invulnerable save, the ability to fly, -2 to charges, things like that, and the amount of devastating firepower they can put out, they're probably going to end up being, it's almost like the Leviathan kind of comes out there as like the bait, really, but the repulsors end up being what kills you.
Yeah, and I mean, you go into predetermined maps and landscapes, such as like a pro tabletop, where the terrain is the same, but it's got a good source of line of sight blocking. Right now, you're taking you're taking a castle and moving 5 inches, trying to double shoot with it. I think that just sets up a trap, and ultimately it's going to lose a lot of people games. So I think they're very beatable. I don't think there's a whole lot of changes need to be made or FAQs to be popped. So I think they've actually hit a pretty decent point. I know people complain and say that there's a power creep, but there was a power creep when your Lord Discordance came out.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, how many attacks were we talking? When that thing procced
Yeah,
against
like
the,
in the 30s or something. It's insane.
so there's a power creep to every codex. Obviously, there's one unit you're gonna jump to most of the time, and auto include for the most part. But I think they're on a good track. I'm excited to see what the Imperial Fist are gonna bring, just to add to the cohort. I still think they're probably going to be the strongest. I'm excited to see a lot of white scars, turn one type stuff. That alone could also help shut down uh, Iron Hands,
Yeah,
white scars.
definitely.
Being able to turn one assault, and if you can use terrain the correct way, like we've talked, Red's had episodes on here where he's talked about using ruins to assault through. I mean, there's plenty of ways to do things outside the box and shut armies down. So I don't think they're super over power creeped at the moment. You'll see a ton of them out there, but um, they're really good. Uh, Salamanders, so we haven't seen much of them. They don't have a whole lot of support prior to the Codex, so it's going to be kind of a coin flip there, and unless they have some really good outside of that one strat that everyone's talking about that they're hoping gets FAQ because it's so ambiguous.
Yeah,
The
really odd wording.
Yeah, you can't shoot the John Cena strat basically. You can't see me kind of thing. Uh,
Yeah, if it continues to work the way that, as well, especially the way it's worded, because the way it's technically worded, it can affect any infantry. So in soup armies, for example, you have things like Cataphren destroyers, like Ryza destroyers, or whatever that are sitting back there, or Castellan robots that can't be shot at. Well, no, they're not infantry, but any powerful DACA producing infantry unit. I predict that if that stratagem continues to, or it is real or whatever, and they'll FAQ it to be Salamander's infantry only. Even so, that's still powerful. But it's
yeah,
worded
no,
really weirdly. It needs to be adjusted so that it's more clear in how it's used.
right. And there's the the little bit that we have seen of salamanders that hasn't really like just jumped out at us anyway. So I'm not sure what you would use with that strat. There's a
Yeah,
couple,
I
not
can't.
just if you just consolidate just the salamanders section, right? Like you said, if it's a Imperium soup thing, then you have problems.
Yeah,
But I can't see it the way they're trying. The way they even said that you can't even use an assassin, I can't see them trying to broadband a stratagem.
yeah, no, I agree. I think it definitely gets FAQ to Salamander's infantry only. And then you're starting to look at units like Centurion Devastators or just Devastator squads that are untargetable, firing a bunch of las cannons, that sort of thing, maybe. Which
And
is
I'll
devastating in its own right, but
right. And I'll tell you, I think if you like the doctrines and the mono codex mono faction type scenario that GW is doing, you probably need to reach out and thank Horton and Draughton for emailing them probably like every 2 hours or something, wanting
yeah.
mono factions and stuff. So, but yeah, what about you? Got any takes on the new stuff, Red, from where you're standing?
I mean, so, and I'll only do this once, I promise. But you've met some of the people. I met some of those same people last year when I was there at Nova and everything. And these are nice, very well-intended folks. I mean, all of us have met some of these people that have had something to do with the overall process along the way. And if you've been to any of their releases, like we saw and met some of the team at LVO last year, and there's some really great people, and they're really doing. I mean, when you think about it, several years ago, when we were waiting years for updates in some of these armies, it was it was awesome when a release came out. And nowadays, the hype train, it goes back to something, Robert, you mentioned earlier, that there is a machine to this, right? They are making money. This is a money making business. But I tell you what, man, like, to get to my point, could the Chaos Space Marines not have gotten the same kind of treatment up front? Like, did it really have to be like they dropped 2.0 and then they just went right into an 8-book release for normal Space Marines? You're telling me they couldn't? We would have eaten it up. They could have gotten 6 months out of us with Chaos Space Marine material like this. You know what I mean? Like, they could have done it. And I'm not saying that they have to do it for us on the back end, but I'm saying it might be appreciated. Like, get through all this Psychic Awakening stuff. Show us all the new I mean, look at what they can drag out, right? So Space Marines, you're talking Space Marine book and then 7 supplements. You're talking Psychic Awakening and redoing Phoenix Lords and Aspect Warriors and some of the Dark Eldar stuff in between and everything. You're telling me after all that, and that could be a year from now, for how well they could space all this stuff out, right? You're telling me that in August of 2020, I couldn't get more Chaos Space Marine stuff? And I know that, I mean, we know there's more, right? Because we know Death Guard is going to get done up. They're going to get some new stuff because it's their time, right? Like, Space Marine's right in line with it. And so if you think Iron Hands are resilient, just wait for the next Death Guard Codex, because that stuff's going to be ridiculous. I mean,
Yeah.
The escalation, so what we call ridiculous, it's just escalation. It's not that ridiculous.
So I mean, I hear you, and I feel like you just said, we, after speaking to them and after seeing they sell models, and they
do
just
it
made
very well.
and they do it very well, and they just made all these Chaos models. So they also made the Primaris models. What are they going to do with the Chaos? They're going to keep selling it. They're going to repackage it. I think, and I may be totally off the rocker here, but I we have a chapter approved coming up at the end of the year as well. So what's to say? As much as I can see them doing this, they've used every codex as a trial and error scenario for a lot of different things this edition. We talked about the re-rolling all hits and stuff together. That was not originally done like that, and it was scattered between different characters on how you did things. So what's to say that they don't come in line with maybe a chapter approved, and say the books that they just came out with for Chaos? I mean, I can't see, that would be something they could easily do. Slide that in there. Hey, Chaos gets these doctrines if you're full on, right? And that's an easy 2 sentences and a flow chart. I mean, I could see that happening.
I'm not gonna sit here and Robert, you mentioned earlier talking about how sometimes someone walks up to the table and they you can't expect them, unless you sit there and ask them, right? They're not going to divulge the entire codex to you necessarily, right?
Right.
I mean, some things that I don't mind that I'm kind of looking at, and it's not as good, and people will be like, "Fine, bring it, Red." No one cares about me and my corn list and everything. I get it, but I mean, Chaos Space Marines didn't lose Linebreaker, right? They still have the Linebreaker strat, and that is I'm not saying that Space Marines have lost it. I'm saying that it doesn't exist in the current Space Marine Codex as it is. I wouldn't be surprised if or Imperial Fist have it in their Codex, maybe, right? Maybe. But for the most part, Linebreaker is gone from Space Marines right now, and Chaos Space Marines still have it. And 3 Chaos Vindicators isn't really that optimal, but that stratagem is nothing to scoff at. especially when you're talking about castled up Iron Hands. 3d3 mortal wounds. I mean, you could quickly delete all of those characters in the middle of that castle with that.
Yes, you could. Yeah, it's pretty brutal. I mean, it's a significant point investment to do it, but but at the same time, it's devastating if you can pull it off.
Well,
And I think combining that with certain things in Chaos that they have, like Disco Lords, for example, because what you want to do is you want to pull the priority off of those Vindicators and Disco Lords and things like that, Corn Berserkers rushing up at you, things like that are going to affect the target priority if you don't get to go first, for example.
Yeah.
Artifacts, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and when you say, point wise, I mean, really, it's only 375 points.
Yeah, it's not that bad.
In the scope of some of the stuff out there, right?
Well, I mean, like I said, we're lonely totem pole players in this big world of they're making a ton of money off of us at the moment.
They sure are.
Their stocks keep going up, so they're going to keep selling models, okay, and that's number one on their agenda. Number two is the game, because they're paying their bills with the models, not the game, technically. So, or else they wouldn't have stuff to accessorize, such as paints and stuff. I'm actually just thrilled that they actually have a lifeline, and getting to meet all the community people at Nova was a big deal. And when I was refereeing the Invitational, getting to talk to them all day was very insightful. So I mean, they have a lot of care. You see it in them, and you met them before as well, and there's a lot of care in there, and there's a lot of I won't say resentment for like competitive play, but it's not the beer and pretzels game when you're in competitive mode as it used to be.
Well, and I'm okay with that. I'm totally. You know what the nice thing is that, again, like, they are legitimately putting out some awesome looking stuff. I'm totally appreciative of all their efforts. The game is going to happen as long as they continue to put stuff out. The game will continue to be out there, and I totally agree. Like, it is on us to create whatever environment we want, right? So, like, the community is a greater whole. We have created what is now known as a competitive environment.
It's a vacuum.
Right. And GW has facilitated us with these awesome models to be able to do this, right? They've given us rules, they've given us facts and all that, but it's not like the old days where they ran Ard Boys tournaments and everything like that. And that's okay. Like, we have done an all right job with our own series of events across the board. And the community, for the most part, is governing itself to hopefully continued and better progress.
Hopefully.
I mean, that's what we all hope, right? For whether it's the community of the game or the community of just the community, we hope.
Well, I like I said earlier, I think there's a small power creep, but then there's also where the rules come line with everything else, trying to bring everything else on to a status quo. I think leveling out the playing field by making things the same is a pretty large deal for competitive play. One, it's great to be able to have someone even new to competitive match play type stuff come in and understand what everything does instead of talking about that like past opponent stuff. If everything's the same and somewhat uniform, then it's a whole lot easier to learn, a whole lot easier to play. So I feel like that's where they're going with this. I hope that's where they're going with this, because anything make play. Uh, they wanted to try to get everything different games, but they realized that you can still give it a different name, but it does the same. But but I think the Marine codexes are you're going to have to play paper rock scissors a little bit to have a little more creativity to your list when you go into a tournament. So because you're going to have so many different. It's going to be awesome. It's I can't tell you how many times I don't to go to a tournament fight 8 demon players that's just going to sit on the objective and win a game and not have any interaction of the game. Or I mean, it takes half the game away as far as a game, right? It's no longer a game. All right, I'm gonna roll my. Gonna smite my death. Now there's all kinds of builds out. The different things that are gonna force even demon players to play something, right? Gonna force players to switch it up. You're gonna have a lot of with the mass production of codexes and psychic awakening coming out. You're gonna have a lot of small changes. I won't say large changes, but you'll have a lot of small. And it's going to be really hard to gauge the meta all the way through LVO. Because you're going to have all the way up until LVO. But it's definitely going to be good. I know a lot of Chaos players. A lot of Xenos players are worried that their stuff's not up to date. I know Gene Stealer Colt feel really good with the exception if Marine players. I think you're wrong. You don't take them favors. But outside of that, I think still a lot of play left. I don't know. Everything's playable. Marines were unplayable for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, outside of the Bobby G builds, I mean, that's all you saw before, and that there was no variety in Marines. And now, I mean, there's just so much that they can do. I mean, it's not like before where you kind of had your set list. Now there's just all kinds of different ways that they can play. Within the different factions that make. I mean, you don't need. You can argue even that Bobby G is not even the most optimal choice to take with Marines anymore. I mean, that's where we are in the polarization of where they were before to now.
Right. Well, again, I feel everyone's pain because I play a lot of different armies. It's definitely weird trying to go from, say, you're always thinking of a soup kind of a build to now I want to try to do this mono thing. And like we were talking about, you can't even have an assassin. So that's a lot of people relied on things such as that to help them through games and tournaments. So we'll see. I mean, the sky's the limit, but we'll see if someone can break the limit. Right now, I think everything's on a good level playing field. I would like to see everything else come up in line. We even saw that there's a new updated rule book that popped out today. So we still don't know what's in that. I mean, is it the chapter approved type stuff where you don't need your chapter approved? They didn't really give a whole lot of meat and potatoes and definition of what's in it outside of it's just a rule book. So we'll see.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of an interesting move by them. I think one of the chief complaints of Eighth Edition up to now that we're kind of deep into it has been the rules bloat, right? Where you're it's really hard to keep unless you're just on top of it regularly. It's hard to keep up with all the different, with the rule book, the codexes, supplements, white dwarfs, and then chapter proofs, and then also the FAQs thrown in there.
Yeah, it's a continuous flow chart with the rules right now, and it's hard. And like you said, unless you stay on top of it. So we'll see. I mean, without speculation, we don't know what's in that that new rule book, with the exception of did they put chapter approved in there and update all the the beta rules that used to be beta rules, the bolter drill, stuff like that. So we without speculating too much, we have to give them a little good faith, and hopefully they did the right thing and put all that in there, so we don't have to carry 5 books and it's 1 book now.
That would be nice.
Even though I just bought all these little scrawny little books for Marines that cost you a fortune.
Right. It's
that'll be outdated in 2 weeks. But yeah, again though, even though I just paid money for this, we have to show some kind of good faith in hoping that they get their stuff together and these trial and errors kind of slow down, which like we just said, can't really think of too much outside of the stone to get FAQ'd out of 2 codexes that just popped out. The Ultramarines didn't have a whole lot. So, to me, it seems like they're on the right track, as much as the other armies don't want to say so. At least from a GW standpoint, they're on the right track. But anyway, we could go on and on about speculation and all that, but we'll go ahead and stop with the Marine talk for now. Have you built actually a list you were talking about running for Iron Hands, right?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of different versions, like 2 or 3 different lists. One of the ones that I had has like 3 or 4 Razorbacks in it. The Leviathan, of course, and a couple of like Contemptors. I have one that and the Repulsors, of course. I have one that's like 2 Repulsor Executioners and Leviathan and some troops. And the Chapter Master, of course, upgrade. I think Dreads are probably going to be like where the bread is buttered with these guys. I like the idea of like Razorbacks with Iron Hands, because it's a high volume of firepower. You get to move and shoot without penalty, and you're rerolling 1s. So, and it's at -2 AP. So it's a lot of DACA that can bring down units really quick. You're talking about like guardsmen that are not getting a save at all. They're just being picked up. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. A lot of different ways to go. And then you've got, like, for example, in that build I have where you have the Razorbacks, when the Leviathan starts getting threatened, you've got the ability with like Razorbacks to charge in to those units that are coming up to threaten them, to kind of speed bump them or move block or whatever. And of course the Repulsors are insanely strong. Even just your basic Repulsor.
Right.
The Repulsor Executioners, of course. I kind of feel like what you were talking about earlier with like the Repulsor Executioners being limited to that 5-inch move. It's not like Ultramarines where they can move to 10 and still double shoot. You can kind of box yourself in a lot of missions, and wanting to maximize the use of that. I think it arguably just regular Repulsors might even be better, because you can move those guys the full 10, shoot everything without penalty and re-rolling ones.
Right. It's volume of shots at that point.
Correct. It's a volume of firepower.
Quantity over quality, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there's so many different ways to go with it. It's crazy.
And I know Red was very interested in the Phobos Dreadnoughts, but he's playing. He's going to stick with Corn for the moment. You're on. You're muted.
Thanks. So I'm gonna let the dust settle, and for everyone to get bored with Space Marines, and then I'm gonna bring out. I think you saw it, Daniel. I've got a list with 3 Stormhawk interceptors, 3 Storm Talons, 3 Phobos Dreadnoughts, and like 3 scouts and a couple characters or whatever. And I'm just gonna enjoy the circus at that point. But I'll wait again. I'll wait for a while. But I mean, I think that the Flyers are gonna go. I mean, I think that there's a lot of potential to them. I think 3 Stormhawk interceptors is scary and should be scary since they're -2 to hit from everything else that flies, and being toughness 7. I just think they're going to be tough to take out. And then the 3 Storm Talons are what everybody wishes Razorbacks were, essentially. And their ability to hover is going to put them in a perfect position. I mean, there's just a lot going on with that list that you don't need characters at that point, right? Because these things are all moving around, re-rolling ones anyways. And so, and then of course the 3 Phobos Dreadnoughts are just there. I mean, I think I went down to 2, but I mean, infiltrating and holding their ground. I think the troops consisted of, I think, 2 infiltrator squads and 1 scout squad. And then again, the characters were, the Iron Father, who's a steel for 110 points, and then I think a lieutenant to allow me to reroll wound somewhere in there. And I mean, that's the list, right? And again, like, you could block out knights. You can do all kinds of stuff with 6 Space Marine Flyers that don't really care if they get shot or not. I mean, they do to a certain extent, but for the most part, they retain their double their wound values, right? Because they're Iron Hands. They have feel no pain, and they take no penalties to the 18 shots of heavy weapons they have, which are also +1 to their AP, which is just ridiculous.
So Mark Hertel from up north, he ran a very similar list this past weekend in RC, except played all those planes as Imperial.
Well, then he missed out. But I understand that you were. I'm sorry. No, you weren't. You guys didn't have the Iron Hands in there, right?
Yeah. A lot of tournaments didn't have the Iron Hands, but he's also been running Imperial Fist for the Centurion for all the portal wounds. So he may have just used it just for the both type area. But yeah, myself, I'm building. I got a couple of different builds with Iron Hands as well. I was looking at building the all Dreadnought, very similar to something that I was playing with as Death Guard. And then I also have another build with Land Raiders. So type scenario with going non-traditional, not using the X like everything for better or worse. And then the planes are a really good combination of all those buffs. It's going to be very interesting. We're going to see a lot of them, a lot of Iron Hands out there. Hopefully we can see more than just like we were talking about earlier, where the field is just not overly saturated with certain arms, but a nice mixture where you're not playing the same thing over and over again. So, but on that note, I know Red's got to go tend to life, and it's getting late over here. I know you guys are an hour behind me, so we're gonna head on into talk a little bit about upcoming events, and I'm gonna let Robert tell you a little about Warzone Come the Apocalypse. Um, Coming up here next month. That's probably the next big event that I have as well. And then after that, it's just a roller coaster into tournament land, basically, from here on out through LVO. So my my family better buckle up because we're gonna have to share weekend. So Red, I know you've got to go. We appreciate you being on and everything. If you have anything else for Red, hit him up on the Facebook page, and he'll reply back to you. We're gonna skip Red's corner for the moment. We'll come back.
I think the best. I mean, besides what we've had tonight, we can say that I recommend going to what we were recording previously with Come the Apocalypse. So for any of our listeners that are listening to our stuff, go to Come the Apocalypse. We had some great conversation earlier this evening. Totally worthwhile listening to, and that's about as good as I'm going to get for this episode as far as my closest thing to working with Commissar Red. So.
All right, buddy. Well, you have a good night. We'll see you later.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure. Thanks, Daniel, once again. And Robert, always a pleasure. I look forward to seeing you in the near future.
Yes, sir. Have a good night.
All right, buddy.
Take care, folks.
So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Robert and let him explain how it all kind of started down there in Dothan area, in the Dothan, Ozark, and Enterprise kind of area where his home store of Fanatics is. I used to actually live down there, so it's great to actually be able to talk to the folks that live there and play there, still from back in the days when I lived there. So it's great to see someone picking up the torch and running with it and doing really well with it. He's sold out every year, so I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kind of explain everything.
Yeah, so we're going into our third year of our GT. We started, the first one was back in 2017. I had been running events for 2 or 3 years here locally, just RTTs. And we started, really kind of pursuing ITC back when it was mostly towards the West Coast, just kind of slowly making its way over here. We started running ITC events, RTTs, and then we decided, hey, why don't we try to run a GT? And now, mind you, this was, running GTs are fairly common now, just about there's like several every weekend now. And it wasn't like that when we started. Just over the past year, the tournament scene, especially with larger events, has just exploded to a point that I don't think any of us who were playing the game 5-10 years ago would have ever thought possible. But back when we started it was a matter of there was only a handful of GTs in our area, in our region, every year. So we wanted to. I traveled at the time to large events, but we wanted to bring that experience to our local community. So our group here, with our game club, Night Paladins Wargaming, sat down and started trying to make the preparations to host a grand tournament. And it went very well. We started a podcast, which we continue to do to this day, Come the Apocalypse Podcast. We networked with a lot of the community. And of course, I had connections with Reese and the ITC for many years now. And we started it, like I said, 2017 was year one. We had a great turnout, sold out. And then year two, which was, of course, last year, we sold out within like a month or two of ticket sales opening up. And then this year as well, I think we opened up ticket sales in May, and then by June we were sold out. So it's become a kind of popular event down here amongst our folks and the folks within a 5-6 hour radius. It's fun. We have a lot of fun. This year we are running Warzone Atlanta missions. Warzone Atlanta has over the past several years become kind of the major event in our region, in our neck of the woods. So we partnered with the general staff last year, and we ran missions that were very similar to the Warzone-like missions that I designed that were kind of similar to the Warzone format. And this year we're using the Warzone Atlanta 2019 primer, which Kelly Wallace was so gracious enough to let me get to run the event. So yeah, it's an event that we want to reward all aspects of the hobby, from sportsmanship to painting to generalship. It's a very friendly environment.